Karoline Leavitt just grilled Joy Behar on The View. What she said left The View host frozen. She's probably only there because Trump thinks she's a 10. Joy Behar didn't even blink when she said it. The studio laughed, cameras rolled, but on the other side of the screen a spark had just lit a political wildfire. The comment was aimed at Karoline Leavitt, 27 years old, a rising conservative voice, and the newly appointed National Press Secretary for Donald Trump's 2024 campaign. Young, articulate, and exactly the kind of woman The View couldn't stand. Joy's jab wasn't just a personal insult, it was a shot across the bow of every woman who dared to climb the political ladder without following the liberal playbook. But Karoline didn't flinch. She didn't retreat. Instead, she clapped back with fire. It all started like every other morning on The View. Whoopi Goldberg opened with a sigh and a stare. Joy Behar laced up her sarcasm, and Sunny Hostin prepped her usual pivot to race. The target this time, Karoline's sudden rise in the GOP ranks and her stance against woke politics. Whoopi sneered. Without wokeness, she wouldn't even have a seat at the table. Sunny added, "It's ironic that someone like her, who benefited from the very movement she mocks, can't see her own privilege." The panel agreed. They dismissed Karoline's accomplishments, questioned her qualifications, and implied again that her looks were her ticket. But this time, the backlash didn't wait. Karoline fired back online with a viral takedown video that clocked over 3 million views in its first 24 hours. The View doesn't empower women. They attack those who think for themselves, she said. They claim to fight for equality unless you're a conservative. Then they mock your looks, your beliefs, and your right to exist in public. She didn't stop there. Karoline called out the hypocrisy of the left, their obsession with labels, and their fear of losing control over the cultural narrative. She called Joy Behar a feminist when convenient, and accused the show of pushing women backwards. The only glass ceiling they want to shatter, she said, is the one they built for themselves. Within hours, conservative influencers picked it up. Fox News ran it on primetime. Even liberals quietly admitted it hit hard. Meanwhile, inside, ABC producers scrambled. What started as a snide segment had ignited a PR crisis. Sponsors called, advertisers hesitated, executives demanded meetings, and still, Karoline's words kept echoing across the internet. They don't want strong women, they want obedient ones. In the days that followed, things got worse for The View. Clips from past episodes resurfaced, ones where the panel had mocked other conservative women. Nikki Haley, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Elise Stefanik. Each one belittled, dismissed, or laughed at. Karoline's supporters drew a pattern. Liberal women were celebrated. Conservative women were ridiculed. It wasn't about ideology, they argued. It was about control. And Karoline had just broken the script. The hashtag Cancel The View began trending. But this time it wasn't just from the right. Even loyal viewers were questioning the tone. This felt mean-spirited. One tweet read, "You can disagree with someone without reducing them to their appearance." The backlash had traction, and it had teeth. Rumors swirled inside ABC, whispers of internal memos, heated producer meetings, a top-level review of Joy's on-air behavior. Executives wanted damage control, but the storm was already online where no PR team could stop it. Then came the second wave. Karoline went on national TV. She appeared on Newsmax, Fox Business, and even CNN's morning show. Every time she stayed calm, direct, and brutally honest. "They hate me because I don't play by their rules," she said. "I'm young, I'm conservative, and I'm not afraid." Her message resonated. Across college campuses and political forums, she was suddenly the new face of bold conservatism. Not angry, not apologetic, just clear. Even liberals were paying attention, not because they agreed, but because she couldn't be ignored. By the end of the week, ABC issued a statement, not an apology, but a vague nod to editorial standards and future reflection. Translation, they were nervous. Karoline responded simply, "I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking for consistency. If we claim to empower women, we don't get to silence the ones we don't like." Her video response now sat at 8.4 million views. The View's YouTube segment had turned off comments, and advertisers, a handful, quietly pulled back reviewing placements. Behind the scenes, staffers said Whoopi was furious. Joy refused to discuss the fallout. Sunny blamed coordinated attacks. But outside that studio, a narrative had already shifted. Karoline Leavitt didn't just survive the media hit job, she weaponized it. And in doing so, she exposed something far bigger than a talk show, a cultural double standard that punished dissent while pretending to promote empowerment. She had stepped into their arena. They mocked her, but she lit the match. By Monday morning, the studio halls of The View didn't echo with laughter. They echoed with tension. Producers were locked in back-to-back crisis meetings. PR teams were redlining statements. Interns whispered that upper management had taken over Joy Behar's talking points for the week. But the numbers told the real story. Friday's episode had lost 400,000 viewers, its steepest drop in over 2 years. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt's name was everywhere. Her takedown had become more than a moment, it was now a movement. TikTok teens, conservative Gen Z influencers, even mainstream outlets like The Hill were dissecting the fallout. Karoline Leavitt did what no one's managed in a decade, one pundit tweeted. She made The View look outdated on their own turf. What was once a daytime safe haven for liberal commentary had now become the bullseye for cultural backlash, especially from younger women. This isn't feminism, a viral post read. This is gatekeeping dressed in empowerment. ABC tried to steer the storm. They quietly shelved 2 planned political segments. One executive floated the idea of issuing a panel-wide apology. Joy refused. "I stand by my joke," she said in a leaked recording. If the right can't handle sarcasm, they should stick to country music and church potlucks. That quote, once leaked, only fanned the flames. Overnight, Joy became a trending topic for all the wrong reasons. Conservative blogs dubbed her Hollywood's mean grandma. But the backlash wasn't just digital, it was economic. By midweek, 3 brands pulled advertising from The View. One issued a statement, "We support dialogue, not divisiveness." Karoline responded live on Newsmax. "If mocking young women who succeed without the left's permission is your brand, then expect a refund." Back at ABC, the damage control manual was failing. Ratings slipped again, this time across all demos. Even the core 45-plus female audience had tuned out. Executives blamed overexposure. Critics blamed arrogance. Sunny Hostin tried to pivot. She tweeted a thread about systemic misogyny, but it was quickly ratioed by replies pointing out the irony. "Systemic misogyny," one wrote. "You mean like reducing Karoline Leavitt to a 10 on TV?" Even Whoopi looked rattled. She opened Tuesday's episode with a vague monologue about respecting all voices, but never named Karoline. The audience didn't clap. The silence was deafening. Meanwhile, Karoline kept rising. She launched a newsletter, opened a donation page for young female conservative candidates. Her followers ballooned, and her allies, they multiplied. Senator Marsha Blackburn tweeted, "Karoline is proof that conservative women don't need validation from daytime TV. They lead." Even independents started to rally. A new YouGov poll showed trust in The View had dropped by 18% in 1 week. The biggest drop was among female viewers under 35. Then came the third wave. Karoline announced she'd accepted an invitation to guest host a conservative rival program during the same hour The View aired. The show, The Real America, its tagline. "We don't just talk, we listen." And just like that, the time slot war was on. Producers at ABC panicked. It wasn't just about a bad PR week anymore. It was now about survival. That Friday, The View aired without Joy Behar. She was on vacation, they said, but sources whispered otherwise. Karoline, she went live. Viewership spiked. Clips went viral. Again. She smiled into the camera and said, "They tried to bury me. They forgot I was a seed." The internet erupted. So did donations to her PAC. And for the first time in years, The View looked like what it feared most. Out of touch. ABC's control room had never been so quiet. A week after Karoline Leavitt's viral takedown flipped The View on its head, producers had a new concern. Whispers of cancellation weren't just trending, they were circling boardrooms. The network's midday flagship was bleeding viewers' credibility and ad dollars, and Karoline She wasn't slowing down. On Monday, she announced a new initiative, the Liberty Bench, a mentorship program for young conservative women in politics and media. It was polished, professional, and pointedly marketed as everything mainstream feminism claims to support minus the hypocrisy. The View's reaction: silence. Not a word on air. It was strategic. Executives hoped the blackout would suffocate the story. But outside their echo chamber, it only proved Karoline's point dissent wasn't debated, it was deleted. She capitalized. On her next appearance on The Real America, Karoline held up a printout of The View's official Twitter feed. Not a single mention. They mocked me on national television, but now that I'm responding with facts, they've gone mute. That's not feminism, that's fear. Her delivery was calm, deliberate. The backlash was instant and widespread. Media outlets started asking questions: was The View losing its edge? Had its format gone stale? Even the New York Times published a Sunday op-ed: is The View out of view behind the scenes? Sunny Hostin pushed for a comeback segment, a panel on young voices in politics, to include a token conservative guest. Whoopi shot it down. We don't reward trolls, she reportedly said. But their silence had become its own scandal. In digital spaces, users weren't waiting. Dozens of side-by-side comparison videos went viral showing the show's history of dismissing conservative women. One video montage titled "Silenced by Sisterhood" reached 11 million views in 3 days. It was damning. Karoline, however, stayed on message. This isn't personal, she tweeted, it's cultural. Millions of women are tired of the elitism disguised as empathy. She followed it with a call to action: don't wait for a seat at their table. Build your own. Meanwhile, ratings at The View continued to slide. Advertisers began shifting spend to YouTube creators and rival talk formats. Internal memos revealed a proposed revamp, rotating guest hosts, a focus group reboot, and possibly phasing out Joy by year's end. None of it leaked. All of it buzzed. Back on camera, Karoline doubled down. She hosted a live stream Q&A from a college campus. Her title: The View from Here. She answered questions from women who felt ignored, who said they were too conservative for campus clubs, too outspoken for HR. And with every answer, Karoline did what The View refused to: she listened. By the end of the stream, she had 50,000 live viewers, and then came the tipping point. A former producer of The View appeared anonymously on a podcast. We had a rule, she said. No platforming rising conservatives unless we could frame them as problematic. The goal wasn't dialogue, it was dominance. The clip went nuclear. That night, Karoline posted only 3 words: told you. So, by Thursday, ABC executives called for a roundtable. The words format, fatigue, audience drift, and brand erosion filled the air. But even as they debated, Karoline had already booked another appearance, this time on 60 Minutes. The teaser alone made waves. They wanted me to play their game. I brought my own board. By the time Karoline Leavitt walked onto the 60 Minutes set, the stakes had transformed. What began as a spat on daytime television was now a full-blown national narrative. ABC executives, corporate sponsors, political strategists, everyone had taken notice. This wasn't just about ratings anymore. It was about reputations, revenue, and relevance. The interview aired Sunday night and drew record numbers. Karoline, in a simple navy blazer, didn't just defend herself, she dismantled the media playbook in real time. I wasn't attacked because I was wrong, she said calmly. I was attacked because I refused to be silent. Clips of the interview flooded social media before the episode had even finished. One soundbite went instantly viral. They told me to respect the legacy of the women who came before me. I do, but that doesn't mean I have to pretend they got everything right. Commentators from across the spectrum weighed in. Some praised her poise, others accused her of political opportunism. But few could deny the obvious: Karoline Leavitt had become the most talked about figure in the intersection of politics, media, and modern feminism. ABC responded the only way it could damage control. The View returned Monday morning with forced cheer. Whoopi's smile was stiff. Sunny's eyes avoided the camera. Joy was still missing. Instead, guest co-hosts filled the gaps. The show aired a vaguely titled segment called Voices We Don't Always Hear, and invited a libertarian podcast host. But the panel danced around the Karoline controversy, pretending it had never happened. Viewers weren't buying it. Live chat comments exploded. Address Karoline still waiting on that apology. This isn't journalism, it's evasion. Meanwhile, conservative media doubled down on the pressure. Fox and Friends featured a full segment titled "The View's Vanishing Credibility." The situation boiled over when Media Watch, a long-standing industry watchdog group, released a report showing that over 70% of political attacks on The View over the last 5 years had targeted conservative women. The headline, "Pattern of Bias, The View's Echo Chamber Exposed," and then came the leak. An internal email thread from ABC's PR department surfaced screenshots and all. In it, a senior producer had written, "We either get ahead of this with a public pivot or risk becoming the next CNN Plus. She's not going away." Karoline responded in under 6 words, "No script can cancel truth." The phrase caught on like wildfire. T-shirts, hashtags, even Capitol Hill staffers were seen wearing buttons emblazoned with it. And with pressure mounting, ABC folded. On Thursday, the network announced a full-format re-evaluation of The View, along with a 2-week hiatus. The press release was buried on a Friday afternoon classic PR deflection. But the damage was already carved into public consciousness. Karoline didn't spike the football. She hosted a subdued livestream thanking supporters and reiterating her mission. "We didn't win because we yelled louder. We won because we refused to be shut out." She closed with a quiet bombshell. "And yes, I've been invited to host a primetime special. National network. No filters. Just truth." The internet erupted again. ABC tried to backpedal, claiming their review wasn't punitive but evolutionary. Joy Behar, according to leaked texts, was furious. Whoopi reportedly had offered her resignation, sunny silent, but Karoline, she kept showing up. Town halls, podcasts, university forums. Her message sharpened, truth isn't partisan, and courage doesn't require permission. By the end of the month, The View had lost 21% of its weekly viewership. Sponsors began renegotiating ad buys, and in media circles a phrase echoed, "The circle collapsed from within." The silence that followed ABC's announcement was unlike any the network had endured before, not strategic, not composed, but raw and ragged. The View was off the air, and everyone knew it wasn't just for re-evaluation. It was retreat disguised as reflection. Behind the scenes, executives scrambled to hold the facade together. Joy Behar was refusing to speak to producers. Whoopi Goldberg's legal team had requested clarification on the terms of her contract. Sunny Hostin was reportedly fielding offers from rival networks but hadn't spoken publicly in days. Internally, the word untenable had replaced unscripted. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt didn't let up. She launched her primetime special titled Unscripted: The Women They Didn't See Coming. Aired on a national conservative network, it opened with no flashy intro, just Karoline sitting at a desk. She looked directly into the camera. "This isn't about me," she said. "It's about the millions of women who were told they didn't belong unless they read from the same script." The format was tight and piercing. She brought on guests, entrepreneurs, former liberal feminists, conservative students silenced on campus. The stories shared one theme: rejection, not for failure, but for nonconformity. Ratings soared. Over 6 million viewers tuned in for the first night. By week's end, the program had been greenlit for a full series. Networks who had once refused to book her were now making offers. The title Unscripted became a movement. Karoline took the moment to pivot toward building. She announced the Unscripted Summit, a gathering of cross-partisan female voices scheduled for spring. Not a political rally, she emphasized. A cultural reset. She even invited former co-hosts from The View. Publicly. "Because I believe in conversations even with those who didn't believe in me." The invitation was never acknowledged, but ABC couldn't ignore the shift. With each passing day, pressure mounted to either cancel or completely rebrand The View. Sponsors were clear: no meaningful change, no money. A confidential memo leaked. The brand has become synonymous with exclusion. Course correction must be swift and sincere. Internal brainstorming sessions revealed desperation. Ideas floated range from rotating bipartisan panels to pre-recorded episodes with post-air editing. The damage, however, was not procedural. It was existential. The ratings weren't just down, they were depressed. Viewer loyalty had fractured. Even longtime fans admitted the show had lost its way. One viral tweet summed it up. The View used to challenge power. Now it defends its own. In the wake of her rise, Karoline remained remarkably disciplined. She refused to gloat. When asked if she'd ever join The View, she smiled politely. "No, I'd rather build than repair." She used her growing influence to highlight others: candidates, journalists, filmmakers. Always young, often underrepresented, never aligned with the usual gatekeepers. Meanwhile, ABC held a final emergency board meeting. Reports say the agenda was blunt, replace or retire key talent 2. Rebrand or cancel the show. 3. Offer Karoline a seat or face cultural irrelevance. The final decision leaked the next morning. The View would be discontinued at the end of the quarter. The announcement came wrapped in platitudes evolving audience new creative direction, exciting opportunities. But the public knew better. The View hadn't ended because it was irrelevant. It ended because it refused to evolve. Karoline addressed the news in a single post. We didn't cancel anything. We just showed the curtain. The post was retweeted over 100,000 times in 48 hours. Former viewers of The View began writing open letters. Some were angry, others nostalgic. Many were simply relieved. The show that had once given them a voice had in its final years lost its own. Karoline remained measured. She released a formal statement, "I take no joy in the end of a platform that once challenged norms and empowered voices. But I take great pride in the women who stood up, spoke out, and refused to be silenced, not by applause, signs, not by producers, not by fear." And with that, a chapter in American media closed. But another had only just begun. They said she wouldn't last a week. They said she was too young, too loud, too polished, too political. They said the system would swallow her or ignore her or shape her into something safer. Instead, Karoline Leavitt reshaped the system. By the time The View aired its final rerun, the cultural tide had turned. Not abruptly, not noisily, but with a force so steady it couldn't be denied. The show's cancellation wasn't just the end of a TV format, it was the closing of an era. Karoline's platform, once a reaction to dismissal, had matured into something larger. Unscripted Studios was now a full-blown media operation. Daily commentary, long-form interviews, short-form series about free speech, faith, and identity. But most of all, truth. The Unscripted Summit drew thousands. Not just conservatives, but independents, centrists, even quiet liberals who had grown tired of conformity masked as compassion. Speakers included immigrants, whistleblowers, survivors of ideological silencing, and yes, even former critics of Karoline. One panel titled "Legacy Without Permission" became the centerpiece of the weekend. It wasn't about tearing down old institutions, it was about building new ones that didn't require approval from cultural gatekeepers. Karoline took the stage on day 2 to a standing ovation. She didn't gesture for silence, she waited, patient, focused. Then she began. You were never supposed to hear me speak," she said. "Not because I couldn't, but because they built systems that made sure people like me wouldn't be invited to try." Her voice never rose, but it carried. You were told strong women must sound a certain way, vote a certain way, live a certain way. I believed it once, too, until I didn't. She paused. I wasn't angry. I was awake. The audience didn't cheer. They leaned in. And when I finally spoke, when I finally said, "I won't apologize for existing outside the narrative," they told me I was dangerous, irresponsible, unearned, unqualified. She looked directly into the front row. Yet here we are. Applause thundered. The summit ended with a digital pledge, a movement called Voices First, where thousands signed on to commit to intellectual courage, even when it meant facing backlash. Karoline didn't trademark it. She licensed it free. If you need permission to speak your truth, she said, then it was never your truth to begin with. Back in media circles, the ripple effects continued. Mainstream hosts now began inviting ideological opposites wary of seeming one-sided. Networks scrambled to develop their own authentic format programming. But viewers had grown savvy. They weren't looking for replication. They were looking for revolution. In late spring, Karoline received an invitation she never expected a presidential debate moderator slot. It was historic not because she was young, not because she was female, but because she had built her credibility outside legacy institutions. She accepted. On debate night, she walked to the center of the stage with the same calm confidence she had the first day she went viral. When the cameras rolled, she greeted the candidates, nodded to the audience, and asked her first question, "What do you believe in, even when it costs you?" There was silence, a real one. That question would later be called the moment the 2024 race turned human. Karoline didn't stay on the air forever. She knew the trap of relevance. After 4 years, she stepped back by choice. Unscripted continued with new hosts, new voices. The movement outgrew the founder. She wrote a book, Legacy Without Permission. It became a bestseller, not because it was angry, but because it was honest. The opening line read, "If they ever tell you to sit down until you're invited, build the table instead." And that in the end was her legacy. Not fame disguised as influence, but real disruptive change. Change that didn't knock politely. Change that didn't wait for permission. Change that rewrote who gets to be heard. Karoline Leavitt didn't ask to be included. She made inclusion irrelevant.